Rafael Surio Ruiz was on the way to San Juan when he noticed that all the traffic lights had gone out. Mr. Surio is the mayor of Yabucoa, among the first communities struck by Hurricane Maria last September, and for months he had been lobbying federal officials, local officials, and utility officials, anyone who might help the thousands of his constituents still waiting to get their power back. Now, as he headed north for yet another city meeting, the phone call from home confirmed the worst. Not only was his city of spiky mountains, lush green marshes, and rugged coastline totally powerless again, the entire island had blacked out. Welcome to Spotlight, and on the first ever episode of the show, we discuss Puerto Rico. It took many months to restore electricity in Puerto Rico after hurricanes dealt a 1-2 punch, both Maria and Irma. Many homes are still without power, and the system's future is far from certain. We'll take a look at the way life is now, what life is like, and how they got into the absolute mess they're in today. It's Spotlight for SWRN, and my name is Spencer Walsh. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to today's show. Thank you so much for joining us. And as we set off for the show, at least for the first however many episodes of this season, I pretty much just want to come out here and say that the point is to do informative work about big issues of the day. We're not trying to mess around here. We're trying to be focused. We're trying to give you what you need to know, what you can do about it in an informative way about some of the major, most important issues in our society and what people around the country are still dealing with. And hey, maybe, who knows, we could possibly open your mind a little bit to an issue that you didn't know was really such a big issue. We're going to be shining the spotlight, as you know, on one thing each and every week. And for this first episode, it's Puerto Rico. If you didn't know, which you probably didn't, I went there very recently in the beginning of April. It was only for a few days, but even there, I could really see how much of the island was so effective. Although we only went to the upper right corner of it, we didn't really get that much in terms of exploring, in terms of going around the entire island. It was very easy to see, even when we pulled into San Juan, the most prosperous capital city of the area. It was pretty clear, and it was easy to see how many roofs were non-existent, and frankly were just covered with blue FEMA tarps issued by the government. And it may be so quick for you, as you don't think about Puerto Rico as something America, something of America, a part of America. It is, and it's so easy for us to forget that. I myself, and I'm someone who's cares a lot about Puerto Rico and has really seen myself as someone who tries to be like on the forefront of the struggle. I mean, I have to sometimes remind myself, like, wait, Puerto Rico is a part of America, and it's like this when we could be doing so much better for these people. Yeah, I mean, the situation they're in right now is really inauspicious. Just very recently, there was another blackout where we saw a systematic blackout of almost the whole country. Where more lobbying had to be done by the mayors of the city just to try and push off some influence, just do what they could on the matter. And it was really quite a bad omen to see that happen. Even for Rafael Surio Ruiz, who was the mayor of, as we know, Yabucoa, and has been really dealing with this for 7 months. He says, you have to understand that half our population still does not have power. The morning after the blackout, when he emerged from his operations center to see the Yabucoa city devastated, houses smashed, and downed power lines and poles littering the streets and countrysides. The realization that the island has been left with such a flawed and fragile system after so much time and money spent on recovery hurts in the hearts and souls as Puerto Ricans. This is just seems to be, at this point, an unacceptable situation for the Puerto Ricans to be living in. They deserve better than this. They are one of us. They are Americans. And in America, where we have so much money to spend, and we spend it on so many things that arguably we shouldn't be spending it on, this is not arguable. This is definitely one of the things we should be spending on. Our people, our citizens, they may not be people living in American states, although many of them are leaving to be living in American states, but they are people who are really one of us, and that's the important thing to keep in mind throughout today's show. And moreover here, this has been a problem, a crisis that has been so thoroughly rejected by our government. This is Elaine Duke, a clip of Elaine Duke speaking about this. She's the acting Homeland Security Secretary, and this is just after the hurricane took place, and then after this, you are going to hear Mayor Carmen Yulín Cruz's reaction to the situation.
I am very satisfied. I know it's a hard storm to recover from, but the amount of progress that's been made, and I really would appreciate any support that we get. I know it is really a good news story in terms of our ability to reach people and the limited number of deaths that have taken place in such a devastating hurricane.
Head Mayor.
Well, maybe from where she's standing, it's a good news story. When you're drinking from a creek, it's not a good news story. When you don't have food for a baby, it's not a good news story. When you have to pull people down from their buildings, because I'm sorry, but that really upsets me and frustrates me. You know, I would ask her to come down here and visit the towns and then make a statement like that, which frankly, it is an irresponsible statement, and it contrasts with the statements of support that I have been getting since yesterday when I got that call from the White House. This is not a good news story. This is a people are dying story. This is a life or death story. There's a truckload of stuff that cannot be taken to people's story. This is a story of a devastation that continues to worsen because people are not getting food and water. If I could scream it a lot more louder, it is not a good news story when people are dying, when they don't have dialysis, when their generators aren't working and their oxygen isn't providing for them. Where is there good news here? I mean, the good news is that we're getting heard. The good news is that there's boots on the ground. The good news is that people from FEMA have their heart in the right place and the HHS people know what to do. For heaven's sake, somebody let them do their job. Let them get the food and the water in the hands of people. And then let's talk about good news. I'm really sorry. But you know, when you have people out there dying, literally, scraping for food, where is the good news?
Yeah, and that's a theme, even though this clip of audio that we just published for you was published on September 29th, 2017. Things have largely been the same. And the two themes that you saw, people being relatively unable, government officials being relatively unable to do their job, or being incompetent, or being blocked by big bureaucracy or whatever, that's been the theme, as well as the fact that the White House's reaction has been really quite underwhelming. And that is a theme that really has continued throughout this entire situation, something Puerto Rico has really, really had to deal with. After Maria and the hurricane that preceded it, Hurricane Irma, Puerto Rico all but slipped from the modern era. They're living in like conquistador times. Even now, while officials say the $2.5 billion reconstruction effort has restored power to 98% of the grid's customers, swaths of hilly country across the island are still pitch black after dark, punctuated by lights run on private generators. About 60% of Yabucoa's residents had power as of May 1st. Even restored sections of the grid are nightmarishly unreliable, as evidenced by an outage in April, the second major power failure in a week, and the fourth since early February. I mean, these power, this is no way to live. I mean, with power going in and out, you never know if you can really truly trust on it. Like, how can we allow this to happen here? On the mainland, much of the coverage of the recovery has focused on the island's beleaguered power authority and the politically disastrous hiring of Whitefish Energy Holdings, which is a tiny and inexperienced Montana contractor linked to the Trump administration's Interior Secretary. Here in Puerto Rico, the perception of a condescending and unresponsive government in Washington has been fed by the enduring image of President Trump seeming to minimize the catastrophe while tossing paper towels into the crowd like it was a game. Like the recovery of these people was pretty much a game. It was all for fun. Seemed to be the message that was being portrayed. But an examination of the power grid's reconstruction, based on a review of hundreds of documents and interviews with dozens of public officials done by the New York Times, here by utility experts and citizens across the island, shows how a series of decisions by federal and Puerto Rican authorities together send the effort reeling on a course that would take months to correct. The human and economic change and damage wrought by all the time without power may be irreparable. When the Puerto Rican Electric Power Authority, known from this point forward as PREPA, hired Whitefish for reconstruction, it also declined to request direct assistance from mainland utilities that for decades had routinely dispatched workers to help one another recover from large disasters or even small ones. At the time, FEMA made a highly unusual decision of its own. Rather than advise Puerto Rico to accept aid from mainland utilities, FEMA abruptly called in the Army Corps of Engineers, never mind that the Corps had never rebuilt a major grid after a storm, and by its own account had not made preparations to take on the task in Puerto Rico. The result was a chaotic tangle of overlapping missions and fumbling and not really understanding what was going on here. It just seemed to be no real clear access to what no one really knew what was going on. Here's Sam B, who did something of kind of a special report in Puerto Rico to really explain in a brief way about what in the world was going on with Puerto Rico's power situation.
After the hurricane, PREPA contracted several shady-ass companies to rebuild the grid. One was Whitefish Energy, a company of two based in a cabinet secretary's hometown, and the other was a fracking company called Cobra.
And cobras are not nice animals.
You don't go like, the cobra's here, guys. The cobra's gonna save us.
Obviously, Cobra is not going to rescue the Puerto Rican people. So who is? To find out, I went to San Sebastian and talked to Mayor Javier Jimenez.
Y es bien difícil para tú poder restaurar el sistema eléctrico. Pero aquí nosotros pues tomamos.
Here he says it's very difficult to rebuild the power grid, but he decides to help and make a brigade to help restore the power grid. So pretty much a town brigade of people going around to restore this power grid here. I mean, that's the only thing they can really do because the government is just not really helping them at all. But they have to kind of move past PREPA and be able to make a real power grid, and with people maybe that don't have a lot of training. I mean, maybe they aren't fully ready to go, and maybe they aren't ready to, they don't have years of experience in power, and things just could have been done so much better. So yeah, here's more about the people who are taking matters into their own hands and restoring this power grid.
While power companies do work on the island, it's groups like this ragtag team of 75 rogue volunteers who do a lot of the heavy lifting.
How did you become vigilante electricians? Were you already doing this work before the hurricane?
So people who are now part of the Pepino Power Authority, which can be rescue workers who turn into electricians and just people who have prior occupations but want to see and think they could do better with this current power situation. They take up arms, not to fight a war, but to really rebuild their country.
Es un suplemento a esas personas que tanto necesitaban el servicio de energía eléctrica.
What is a pepino?
La palabra exacta es pepino.
I'm going to call you the electric cucumbers,
the word for pepino is cucumbers, but well, I mean we can move past that. Anyway, back to the government side of things, the grid, the power the power grid there in Puerto Rico was not doing so well, as I'm sure you've already realized at this point.